Good morning. My name is Annalie Amaro. I work with AVAP. I'm the Portfolio Vice President overseeing all of our Workday projects. I have been in higher education, I'm just going to stop at 29 years or more, mainly from the client side, but I've been blessed to be with AVAP overseeing higher education for 4 years. It's been my pleasure to work with Hinds Community College on their Workday transformation for the last 4 years, and I'm happy to be here with Tamisha Johnson and Andrea Janis to talk about their transformation, their project, and their journey through both platform and student. I'll let them introduce themselves. Andrea, I'll start with you.
Good morning. My name is Andrea Janis, and I serve as the Vice President of Human Resources at Hinds Community College.
Good morning. My name is Tamisha Johnson, and I currently serve as the Director of Technology at Hinds Community College.
And why don't you talk a little bit about your roles on the project, especially for you, Andrea. I know it's a little bit different.
So, Hinds went live with Platform in July of 2020. I started at Hinds as Vice President of Human Resources in February of 2021. So we were implemented and well into the working in Workday when I started. We had a large number of turnover in my department before and post implementation, and when you change systems and you really change the way people work, a lot of times people decide that's not how they want to work. We had several retirements. The Director of Human Resources actually retired, hence my position being open. And the new president had just come in July, and he decided that Human Resources needed to sit on his executive leadership team, and that is where I came in. So my approach when I got there was really hands-on. I don't ask my employees or my team to do anything that I'm unable to do. So we really just went to work and learning the system. And we still have a roadmap of things we want to get into the system. Our goal is for everything we do to be in Workday. And so I ask the question all the time, how do we get this process into Workday?
And you want to talk about your role? It's changed a little bit throughout the project.
So the journey for me started in 2019, where we embarked the transformation process within Hinds Community College. I've served on several different roles within the project itself. I served as a project manager, assistant director of technology, and currently the director of technology. All of these changes happened throughout the implementation of our Workday system at Hinds. We went live July 2020. I was present for go live then. We quickly went into student implementation shortly thereafter, and we are now successfully live with student as of March of 2023 and registering our first cohort of students as of August 14th.
So talk a little bit about the president change, because I think that was a little different than some may be going through as they go through a transformation.
Absolutely. So when we went live in July of 2020, that was the first day of our new president also starting his Workday journey. So
he was the first one to onboard.
Yes, he was the first one to onboard. He was the first one to test out the new live system. He was able to offer feedback afterwards. So it was a great journey nonetheless to go through the implementation, onboard a brand new president with brand new visions, outcomes, all of that.
Great. Let's go to the agenda. We'll talk about the overview for our time together. We're going to tell you a little bit more about Hinds and their transformation, but we really want to talk to you about some of the successes that they experienced as they deployed Workday and some of their lessons learned. It's important for you to know their vision, so we'll go to that, and you can see how that was a baseline for what they wanted to achieve, not just as an institution, how they work with their students and their community, but that really has permeated through how they have had the vision for how they wanted to use Workday. So let's go to give them an overview of Hinds as we start with some of our questions. So we began partnering in 2019, as you talked about, and since then, the world's gone through major changes, including a global pandemic. And you have also, as we talked about, new president, other changes. Andrea, you joined after Platform was live. So can you set the stage for how you navigated the change?
So Hinds Community College took a great approach when it came to change management. We sent 10 of our leaders to change management training. And so these were people across all different campuses. Hinds Community College has 6 campuses. So leaders across all campuses and in different roles. They may not have all been even in the higher supervisory roles. We had people that were frontline managers who went to this change management. And they learned and used the ADKAR approach, which is awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And so we use this approach through the change management. And to be honest, students been going live since I started, that process. But in our Workday system, and I think really in Workday altogether, it's always changing. So Workday is so dynamic. I'm sure you've heard through all of your sessions that Workday is always changing. There's always new releases. So we have to continue to change. So we're really in a state of constant change management.
Yeah. So you talked about change since you've gone live. Why don't you talk about how you had to pivot to change in the midst of the platform deployment?
So prior to the lovely pandemic, we were face-to-face doing all of the things that were necessary to get our project off the ground. Suddenly we were hit with COVID. COVID really changed a lot of our perspective as it relates to just overall work and getting our job duties done and completed in a timely fashion. We got the notice the week after COVID was worldwide and we could not return to campus at all, so we had to quickly pivot to online learning, online training, and it was something that we quickly had to adopt because that was not a part of our process throughout our implementation.
And if I recall, we were in the middle of end-to-end testing, and we joked the students weren't on site that week, and the joke was that the president said, everyone will go home for an extra week, COVID will be finished, and then you all will come back. And I think it was a year and a half.
It was a year and a half
before we came back. So how has change management played a role in the Workday deployment, and what were some of the changes that you implemented? You talked about changes during COVID, maybe some of the training changes, other things. How has change management impacted you all?
So with change management, we were forced to go to Zoom learning. That was something brand new for our OCM team. They had to quickly get in, learn Zoom and all of its capabilities in order to share that content with our employees, in order to train them up and get them prepared and ready for our go live. So it was challenging to say the least, but we were able to overcome, and now we're using Zoom in our day-to-day lives, even now after COVID. So.
And you've talked about how important the ProSci and ADKAR philosophy was, and you've continued that with other projects?
Yeah, we continue that all the time at Hinds. I mean, higher education is ever changing. We all know that. And so having a organization that understands change management and is willing to adopt new things all the time, it's made I know my department especially, more dynamic.
Great. I'm going to start with you, Andrea. What advice would you share with other colleges or universities who are embarking on their Workday journey?
So many things. I would start with staffing. Take a real deep dive and look into your staffing and their abilities. There's no reason to start a project and have a certain group on a project that are not going to be able to handle the technology. So if you need to train, do that training before you start. Make sure that everyone's on the right seat on the bus. I'm not saying terminate all employees, I would never say that, and start over, nothing like that. You need everyone, but everyone needs to be in the correct role, and that role may not be the same once you're in Workday. So be dynamic in that and understand that, and I think communicating that to your team is highly important as well. Hey, you are a valued member of our team. You just may not continue this role exactly how it looks right now. It's going to change. Hinds also hired and created 2 additional positions that didn't exist before we started, and those are 2 systems analyst positions. We have 1 position that supports platform, and we have a separate position that supports student. These positions, I cannot tell you how important they are to Hinds. They're maybe the most important 2 positions that we have at the institution at this time. They look at the new releases. They're constantly looking ahead, what's coming out, what can we do to utilize the product better. And they're also our fixers. You call them when something's broken.
Yeah.
And I know that everyone probably has that to a certain extent at this point at your institution, but having that person that is willing to deep dive into the problem and get on the phone with your consultants, maybe 10 o'clock at night, but get on the phone, and they're very, very important to us.
Yeah, they've made a big difference for you all since you've implemented that. Tamisha, what suggestions would you have?
Definitely take a deep dive at your current personnel just to make sure that they're equipped and ready for this huge change, because with us, our 20-year-old legacy system is pretty much all of our staff members. That's what they knew, that's what they lived, that's what they breathed. And it was difficult to teach and inform them that new technologies are out there, and it was something that we needed to adopt. But without that training, we would not be where we are today. So I do want to share that training is critical. Get them in training as soon as you all possibly can, even if you all are just reviewing Workday as a possible replacement for your current system. Get them in training. Understand your data, because that data could be in a different program language than what Workday currently is. So make sure you understand that data, understand your processes. That was also something that we had to overcome as well. A lot of our end users just knew how to put the data in, did not understand the backings of that data. It says it asks for a first name. Doesn't matter to them where that first name lands, but it matters to those who are involved with data conversion where that information lands, because it could be multiple copies of that first name on the back end. So it is critical to understand your day-to-day processes, your data, and make sure that you have the personnel in place to sustain throughout this lovely implementation.
So you're now 4 years into your implementation and you're at the end. Congratulations. What would you have done differently? Andrea talked about the business analyst. What are some other things you may have done differently looking back if you had known what you know now?
Knowing what I know now is definitely getting those who were participating in implementation in training as soon as possible, because even the terminology is different than what they're accustomed to. So making sure that they understood that the same language that they're using with the legacy system will not fly with the new one was also something I would definitely change.
I would say a couple of things. One is clean your data. If you are looking at if you're even a year away from implementation, great. This is a wonderful time to clean up your data. Workday has the most amazing reporting, but bad data in equals bad data out. It does not matter how amazing the system is and how well it can report. If the data that you put into Workday is not correct and has not been validated, you have a mess to clean up. We've been cleaning that up on the HCM side. I feel pretty confident that we're getting there. That's another thing on our roadmap. We've worked in small chunks, but if all of the data that came in would have been good and in the right places, we would be in a lot better position than we are now. The second thing I would say is map your processes. Just because you do it one way in one system does not mean that you need to fit that into this system. Change your processes. Look at what your end goal is for a process and work backwards. Everyone learns completely different. So this may be something you can do in Excel. Maybe it's something that you do on a whiteboard. Maybe you physically put pieces of paper along a long room like this. However you need to understand the end user and what they're trying to get out of a process, that's how you need to map it out. And again, it may be completely different for IT than it is for financials and it is for platform. We may all learn different and look at processes differently, but work on your processes and clean your data.
So it's really important talking about that end state that you want, and not just the how you got there, but really what you want to achieve. So looking at student, how did some of those lessons from HCM and financials determine how you approach student differently?
So one thing that really stood out between the two, platform and student, was breaking down the silo barriers within student. A lot of the transactions that our student side of the house completed had no real interaction with the finance side from what they could tell. So with Workday, we really had to start having conversations outside of just that student services bubble. So student services had to have conversations with finance. They also had to have conversations with HCM. So that was something that they've never done before, and we had to get in front of that because with our legacy system, it just made sense that the silos worked because they worked in their own little bubble. So
How have you leveraged the knowledge of the AVAP consultants and their experiences in higher education to help you as you've made these decisions and had these discussions cross-functionally?
well, very early on when we were going through our partners and trying to figure out which partner would match for Hinds Community College, we had all participants in the room at that time to hear from those partners and kind of hear what they would bring to the table. And one thing that really stood out with AVAP for Hinds Community College was that if they did not have that consultant in place for what we needed, they would find them. And that's something that they have stayed true to as we've been working with them for the last 3.5, 4 years now. So,
On the student side, have the experiences of the consultants who've worked in higher education helped? Is there something that you would suggest for others that they ask for partners as they're going through this process of looking for relationships?
so yeah, the consultants themselves had a huge number of years in higher ed, and that's really what helped guide us into making the right decisions in a lot of our processes, because we did attempt a lot to bring in those old processes from our legacy system and push them into Workday, and we really had some consultants who really shared insight on that's not the best practice, and the practice is to really work through that Workday methodology and make sure that we're doing what we are expecting our outcomes to be, and our true outcome is to really create an environment for our students that we can really nourish them and get them to a point where they could be self-sufficient at Hinds Community College. So a lot of the consultants themselves have already gone through implementation, and they're working with, institutions such as ourselves, and they knew the things that we would come back and say, no, we need it done this way, we need it done that way. And the insight and just the overall clarity that they provided kind of really help us know that, okay, that's not the best practice, that's not the best process to put into Workday, and really had us to reevaluate a lot of the things that we truly wanted.
And Andrea, you've used consultants a little bit differently. Since you came in at the end, I know we did some things where we looked at configurations, and as new people have come on board, helped to train and do knowledge transfer. What does that process look like for you?
So since we had such a great number of turnover, we actually only have one employee HR team member left that was here during implementation. So what that has meant for us is that we have had to, every time someone came on and took on a new role, they had to learn the system. So we invested with AVAP in a lot of knowledge transfers. We recorded those calls. We have those calls now, so when somebody else comes on or I say, hey, you know what, I think it'd be great if you started helping with benefits. The first thing we do is pull up those recorded conversations, and they sit and click through it and listen to it. So it's a fantastic training tool that we've had with AVAP. And then also, there's a lot of things that when you're up against a go live, and again, I wasn't there for the HCM side, but from what I've been told, it was, okay, we have to get it done. This is it, this is our deadline. So we've gone back and reworked so many of our processes that were already in the system. And I wanna say we've probably reworked every single one of them since I started. And AVAP has really been a partner in reworking those processes and letting me know, okay, maybe it's not gonna work this way exactly how you want it to work, Andrea, but these are your other 3 options. And we've very much appreciated that.
Thank you. And it hasn't just been the HCM processes. As I recall, when Dr. Vasic came on day one of Workday, he also switched from a distributed campus model to a district model, also changed the whole finance structure, right? Went to zero-based budgeting.
Yes, so we're on zero-based budgeting, and we have 6 campuses, and prior to Dr. Vasic, he did a full reorganization where we have an executive leadership team that is over all 6 campuses. So me as HR, I have responsibility at all 6 campuses instead of having a vice president on each of those 6 campuses that led the campus. That has made us, again, I say it over and over again, but it's made us a more dynamic institution. It has also made it to where our policies and procedures are the same on all campus. We want our student to walk on any campus and have the same exact experience at Hinds Community College, not Hinds Community College Utica or Hinds Community College Rankin.
So Tamisha, there are challenges in any transformation. Certainly there were challenges here. What were some of the challenges that you faced and key steps that you took to alleviate those?
Which area, platform or student?
Yes.
Because they all they all come with their own separate challenges. And one of the main challenges from the platform that really stood out was just our payroll conversion and having our employees really understand what that meant, moving from one system to the next. One thing that truly stands out is that the taxes on the payroll side were different. They were different to what we were accustomed to. A lot of our employees were accustomed to receiving their payroll check the same amount each month. Workday flipped that for us. So now it's a few pennies off. It may be $1 off, but it's all based off of the taxes for the end of the year. And it really took, almost a year or less to get our employees to a point where they understood, okay, this makes sense. So I'm not really sure of where you all are with your journeys, but if you all could include those who will be impacted by the change that you all are about to embark on, that would be great as well, so that they can too understand what's happening versus being passed a new application that they now have to utilize in their day-to-day transactions. For students, it was difficult for our functional areas to understand their responsibilities with the implementation itself. They really wanted a product to be passed to them and it was ready to go, but getting them on the back end and kind of help working through the configurations and making sure that all of the security was where they needed it to be for their employees to transact in the system was a huge lesson learned for them as well, because they were just passed on a system that was kind of went down the hill and passed on from one employee to the next, and here's the manual on how to do this, and with Workday you have no manual, and yeah, it was something.
So you talked about how important it was to include those who would be impacted. And you all have done a lot of work, especially if you've gone into student, not just working with the end users, the leads, but you have gone deeper into the departments, into students and parents and others in the community to talk to them. Would you talk a little bit about your organizational change process to reach out to those stakeholders and get information?
Well, yeah, we not only considered our employees stakeholders or our subject area experts stakeholders, but we really keyed in on our students as well. We wanted to hear from our students. We wanted to make sure that what we were configuring and building out for our students made sense to them, because it's one thing when you're on the other end and you're configuring to make sense for you from an operating standpoint, but to those who actually have to use it, those are the true subject matter experts. And we really utilized and kind of keyed in on those students, brought them in and allowed them to play around in our preview tenants and make sure that we got feedback from them to make sure that we were doing the right things.
That's great. And all of that hard work has paid off. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just want to say that as someone who's on the steering committee for student, we were there as well. So I'm not saying we were there the whole 4 or 5 hours that they were testing, but we came and sat with the students, talked to them about it, and this includes our president. He was out and about talking with the end users about their experience. And it's one thing to get feedback from the end user, and it's another to take that feedback back and actually use it. And so that's what we did. We really, when we heard something that wasn't working quite right for them, we actually made the change. We didn't just ask for feedback and then let it lay out there.
And your executive team has been incredibly involved. Why don't you talk about some of the ways that you all have been involved with discussions and some of the things you've helped do to help motivate and appreciate the teams?
So we took the approach, several different approaches, but we integrated this implementation into all of our areas of employee recognition. Hinds Community College is a caring campus, and so we have caught in the act of caring. And this is where anyone, whether it be a student, a fellow employee, or a community member, can fill out a form online, in person, that catches someone in the act of caring. So we had several of our team leads and those on the Workday project that were caught in the act of caring during the implementation. We also have an employee recognition program called the Idealists, which is based on Hinds values. We had several people, again, that were involved in the implementation and may have been a team lead that were recognized as idealists. We also recognized everyone who was working on this project during employee appreciation, every single convocation. Any type of large team meeting, we would recognize them there. The HR department, we wrote handwritten notes and had goodie bags and would go around when we knew it was heavy testing days or AVAP was on campus. We would go around and hand them out, just let them know they were appreciated. Seems very small, but when you're in that and you're someone who's doing your full-time job and then taking on this implementation on top of it, we knew as the executive leadership team that these people were working essentially 2 jobs for a very long time. And we wanted them to know that we supported them and we saw them.
Yeah.
And the last thing we did is during these heavy training or testing times, we would cross-train people from other departments to help answer phones, help with foot traffic, and help with emails. And so we could say, hey, we know you have a heavy testing day today. How about half of your staff goes back and sits in a quiet environment while we come in and bring in other people to answer your phones? I think it really helped. I hope. We got there. We crossed the finish line. And so again, very small things, but as a leadership team, we're not going to get down and actually do the work, but we wanted to make sure they felt supported while they were doing the work.
I think all of those things really contributed to your success, and I don't want to go past those. If you'll go back a slide, I want you to talk a little bit about some of the success factors and metrics that you all reached, because there were some incredible things that move forward. You want to talk about some of those, Tamisha?
Yes. So one thing that really kind of stood out after implementation was that before Workday in our legacy system, it took us 2 weeks to complete our board reports. And now with Workday, it's a click of a button for our CFO. He's excited. It has lovely graphs and numbers and all of this wonderful jazz that he appreciates. So without that, I don't think he would be successful in his role at Hinds Community College. Our comptroller, who is responsible for yearly closeout in our legacy system, it took us 6 hours in a quiet system. So usually that's her weekends that she had to contribute to closing out our physical year. And now it's less than 15 minutes for her. So she's excited about that as well. Our students get visibility into where their application process is now. So that's one incredible addition to what they've had in the past, because they would not know whether or not their app had been accepted, whether or not they were put into certain courses that they were seeking. Now they have academic plans and they can see that they have a seat for the next term. So it's been great.
And I know that you all branded Workday and called it Navigator. So if you see some of that branding there, how have you helped raise the enthusiasm of moving to Workday or Navigator on campus? I know you all have had a lot of events to share the word, and what are some of those things you've done?
Well, for our people who were heavy hitters in the implementation process, we're from Mississippi and we love to eat. So during big events, we would cater foods for them, and they were really excited about that. We had a
Really good catering, really good catering.
Yes.
We have good.
So anytime we can feed you, we know we will get something in return. So that has worked out perfectly. We have branded Navigator shirts for not only employees, but for our students as well. Just a lot of cool swag for them to just walk around with. And it's been a blast, honestly, because we always get stopped when we have on our Navigator t-shirts and they want to tell us how proud they are of our work and our accomplishments. But in return, we're actually proud of them because they're actually utilizing the technology that has been put in front of them.
That's so exciting. What a difference the
Yes.
4 years has made
Yes.
for you all. So as we wrap up, what are some advice that you would give today's attendees as they're starting their journey, thinking about their journey and their own transformation? I'll start with Andrea.
So the HR in me says staffing, training, and communicating. Communicate with your employees in every single way you have to communicate with them. So communicate via Slack, via Teams, via Zoom, in person. Schedule times for your teams to be communicated with. We have a large number of maintenance staff at Hinds, and they're not in front of a computer every day. So when we send them an email blast that says, hey, this is what's going on at Hinds, they don't read it. So think about every single level of your employees. So we set times, for them to come in and sit down on the system, us to train them how to clock in and clock out. Very simple things, but I think it goes a long way when someone sits down with someone and says, hey, this is what you need to do and this is how you need to do it. Another thing is we do open enrollment in Navigator, Workday. And so that's starting in October, right when I get home. First day there, we'll start that. And what we do with our employees that may not be on the computer very often is they sit one-on-one with someone from Human Resources and go through that. And so that they can, and a lot of times, to be honest, when they get there, they don't remember their login. I haven't been in here in so long, I just use the app to clock in and clock out. And so sit down with them, talk with IT, get them logged back into the system, go through their inbox, make sure everything that is in there is correct for them. Hey, have you changed bank accounts? Is this address still right for you? That sort of just one-on-one touches, which we cannot do as often. There's only 10 of us in HR, but once a year, we like to really be able to sit down with those employees and get them into the system.
So you're really meeting them where they are, and it sounds like since you're not processing all that paper, you have time to spend with them.
So much more time. I wanted to go back to that. So 2 things. One, payroll used to take about a month. So once payroll was complete, the next payroll would start, and the binder was this large. Every single
600 pieces of paper.
month. It was 600 pieces of paper. That was validated by hand. So think about the hours and the staff that we now have to do other things at Hinds instead of doing payroll. And the other is I inherited my budget, right? So we budget on a fiscal year. So when I got there in February, I inherited the budget. And I was going line through line with our CFO. And I said, why do we have $5,000 worth of postage? Where does that even, how? What is this? And he was like, well, that's contracts. We have to send out contracts. I was like, wait, we physically mail contracts to every single employee at Hinds? He was like, yeah, and you better get started. So I call AVAP, and I said, how are we going to get these contracts into Workday? Because there is literally no way we are hand mailing, thousands of contracts any longer. And we did. We figured it out. And all of our contracts now go out, and we click a button, and they're sent to everyone. They're in everybody's inbox. It's amazing. So,
Thank you. What are some suggestions you would have, Tamisha?
So as you all start this journey, or no matter where you are in the journey, once you say the word Workday, a lot of your employees may think, oh, my job will be eliminated. It will not. It will not. If anything, your institution will grow, your organization will grow, you all will start to redirect some efforts and putting people in other positions. It's not eliminating jobs by far. If anything, we're growing in number versus decreasing in number. So get in front of them and let them know that your job is secure. Like, it is secure. But, some changes may come. You may no longer be in the registrar's office. You may have to now work both the registrar office and another office. You may be in advising. You may be in your student receivables office, and now you have to play with financial aid. So it's not eliminating jobs by far. It is increasing jobs. It is making jobs more readily available.
Thank you very much. I want to allow time for some question and answers, but it's been wonderful for you to share your experiences, and it's been an honor to work with you all, both on this presentation and throughout the 4 years. So based on what they've talked about, if there are any questions, we have 2 microphones up here, and we'd be happy for you to ask Tamisha or Andrea about anything that's happened through their project, their transformation, any of the changes that they've done, questions you have about resourcing, or any of the other things through their project. All right, we're leaving it a little quiet, but Anything else that you've thought of that you would want to share? Last thoughts, tips?
The implementation is tough, and I think any implementation, not just Workday's implementation, will be tough. Just know that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and once you get there, you get to breathe this heavy sigh of relief that just makes those efforts worth it. And once you see the faces of those that it impacts, it just lets you know that that work did not go in vain.
Thank you. Yes, please.
I don't know how to use mics very well. So you talked about when you're implementing student, you wanted to make sure you included students in the testing with feedback. How did you select those students? Did you pick certain classes, talk to faculty, get associated student body?
Usually, when you're picking students to participate in things, you usually get those students that are honor students, those that really know their way around technology in general. But for us, throughout our student implementation, we chose to get those students that we knew that were struggling. We brought them in, and we went to those that are in lower level classes and asked for them to participate. We had athletes participating. We had a vast array of different athletes participating, because with certain athletes, you would have some that are technology driven and some that are not. So we did not go to the norm. We really stepped outside of the box and chose our students accordingly. So we got those with the high GPAs and those with low GPAs.
And adult learners. We made sure that we reached out to our adult learners and were on campus set up at a time when they could come. So not just during the normal working hours, but their after hours as well.
And so how did you reach out to them? Did you go through the faculty and pick classes and ask the faculty, talk to your people, and recommend some people we
Yes.
can interact with, and you got their emails?
We absolutely involved faculty and through our dean of students, and then involved faculty as well.
Thank you. And there were quite a few times where we had a dialogue that you thought students would get turned around on something on the application, and when they came in, they just sailed through that and had questions about something totally different.
Yeah.
So that was a really good exercise to go through. Yes.
How are you doing? I'm MG. I've helped a number of schools with their implementation, so I think this is a great question. With hindsight, that was pun intended, what would you share with this group that you would do differently during your implementation? Because they are hard, right? So I think there's always learning to be done here, but what would you have done differently?
With our employees, or
With your implementation,
Just with the
overall, what's your big tip? What would you have done differently?
For me, just being a director of IT would be understanding those processes, understanding your processes and your data, not just how you click through screens day to day, but understand what those screens mean, understand what the back end of those things mean.
Yeah, and meet your employees where they are. So if you have an employee that cannot log into a system, they probably aren't going to be able to log into this one either. So training, and at the very basic level, I think that a lot of times when we think of computer training, we don't think of, okay, this is a mouse. Okay, you're going to click here for the internet. So really get down into, because so many of our employees, again, like you said, were just handed processes. They were literally handed a book that said, this is exactly how you do your job. So you click on this, and then you click on this, and then you enter this, you click on this. And you do that over and over and over again, and that's all they did. And they didn't really understand what they were even doing with those processes. So what it's done for us, I feel like, on a global level, is it's allowed our employees to really understand their job better. Mm-hmm. What are they doing? And why are they clicking on this? And what process are they doing when they're clicking on something?
Yeah, that was a great question. Yes.
Well, along the lines with that, we're partnering with APAP for our implementation, but you both touched on it. What about your documentation? How is that? So your new process is who develops that? Who leaves that for someone else that gets new to your department, and you don't have to go through everything? They have some documentation available.
Well, with platform in general, we had a business process overview where we kind of picked out the processes that were our most troublesome process in our legacy system, and that's what we brought to the table to kind of discuss and dissect to see how we would be able to enable that in Workday. But there should always be documentation on your day-to-day processes, and a lot of ours are stored in SharePoint.
Yeah, so we have.
Once you get to Workday, who, like, once you set it all up, who does the, like, do you give documentation
The
on
job
how?
aids.
We have a trainer that would develop that content. So with our student analysts and our business analysts as well, they are also involved in creating that content for the employees. So we do, with leadership training, they will come out and our business analysts will kind of showcase any new features, and we would have that information documented and passed out to employees afterwards.
I always make sure that any new employee in human resources has access to Sandbox. And I tell them, if you have nothing else to do, get in there and click around. You cannot break it. Figure out what's in there. Play with it. It's really the only way to learn this system is to get into this system. And so I highly recommend that anytime you have a new employee come on that's going to be working in this system, that they get into Sandbox and spend hours in there. And they'll say, I think I just broke something. I'm like, no, you didn't. It's going to refresh on Friday, which is tomorrow. You're good.
Yeah, and we also use our ads, so a lot of our job aids were created with the actual clicks in mind. So those our ads are also stored out in our Canvas LMS too for our employees to utilize at any time.
Yeah, IRAD's been a great tool for our training with Workday.
Hi, thank you. Curious about your governance structure now that you're fully implemented. I know a lot of schools handle it differently. So just from, the release management, like how the campus thinks about Workday as a whole, who makes decisions, data governance a little bit in relation to Workday as well.
So prior to any feature release, we try to get ahead of that by sharing that content with all those involved. So it goes to student as well as platform to kind of review and see what things that we have no control over and how we can get into a room and kind of understand what that will look like after the feature release. So as far as who is determining what is being turned on and what is not being turned on, we roll with all required that comes down throughout that documentation. And anything else that we would like to onboard that's currently being handled now in our student steering committee. So we have a student steering committee that is, it contains all areas of students as well as platforms. So any little minor tweaks in monthly releases, weekly releases that Workday may have, we talk those through in that group and we decide as a group collectively whether or not we're going to turn a feature on or not. And if it's something that we cannot decide on, then that's when we go up a level to our executive team to make the decision.
And Andrea, you have all of HR, so you redesigned all your business processes, and you have, as the functional owner,
Yes,
ability and oversight without having to go through any type of governance within the broader campus.
correct.
Yep. Any other questions? You have the contact information for Tamisha and Andrea on the screen. Please feel free to reach out to them or to me if you have any questions. It has been a pleasure to share Hinds' journey with you, and I'm so thankful that you stayed with us on a Friday to hear about their journey. Thank you so much for being with us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.